Welcome to the C.S. Joseph Podcast. I'm your host, C.S. Joseph. Sam will not be joining us today, although I do enjoy it when he does join us. He adds a little bit of creativity and flair to what we're doing here. So today's Acolyte question that we're going to be answering today for Acolyte members. They get one question a month they get to ask me, and I make a video or a podcast episode about it so that we all can learn. And today's question is, why do ESTPs and INFJs enjoy sexual role play? Well, they are lust types, and lust types struggle with an insane amount of jealousy. Okay, so the part of Soul Temple people, like, no one likes a fake person, but it's the Soul Temple that complains about it. Soul Temple really, really complains about people being fake, and oftentimes it's because they themselves are the fakest of all the types, especially Soul Temple Templars, being the ESTP and the INFJ. It is a huge problem. Very big problem for them. They can be pretty fake. Thing is, they bring that Soul Temple fakeness with them into the bedroom. And they love them some fantasy, and they love them some role play, right? Fantasy and role play is ultimately everything to these people. So, why not? It's because, they have this objectification aspect as well as their idolization aspect pulls for their cognitive development within their temple wheels. So, idolization is like, they're worshiping something. They're worshiping an object or someone or something, basically. It's an act of worship, but they also want to be worshipped as someone or something, right? Idolization. Very, very important. And then they have objectification, where they treat other people like objects and they themselves want to be treated like an object, right? Like they want to be a prop in the play within the fantasy or the sexual role play that they have within the context of the bedroom, basically, which I find entirely fascinating. The thing is, though, is that is ultimately what ISTJs and ENFPs bring to the bedroom. They bring fantasy and role play. It's all about fantasy. It's all about role play, especially the ISTJs. They like to be the source of the fantasy and the role play. This is why it's extremely common for very fit ISTJ men to be strippers. Channing Tatum, for example, he's a stripper, right? Was John Cena a stripper? He's an ISTJ. But they kind of fit the same mold. They kind of fit the same motif with how they do things, because they're practically the same person, octagram included. And I find that very interesting. But like, what percentage of the men on the Chippendales are ISTJs? They're all into that, and ENFPs. They're all into that role play fantasy approach, right? Being the policeman or being the fireman, etc. That's literally all it is. And they like taking on those roles, and in real life with their jobs and their work, especially with search and rescue, and they like bringing those roles home with them right into the bedroom. That's what these men ultimately do, much to the happiness of their ESTP and INFJ women, right? Much to their happiness, right? Because they love that. Because it's one of the ways that fantasy helps them feel connected to the other person. Connectedness is the cognitive origin of ESTP and INFJ. Connectedness, also known as intimacy. And their intimacy is based on their need for activities, right? To be able to produce and consume activities, also known as quality time, right? So, quality time is a big deal. It's attached to the cognitive origin of intimacy. But then you have ISTJs and ENFPs, who are the wrath types and the golden pairs, the ESTP and the INFJs. They bring the role play and the fantasy into the bedroom, right? And the reason why they do this is because their cognitive origin is justification. Like, hey, if I just put on this uniform, that makes me justified to do XYZ thing, right? Makes me justified to be able to be like this person or to do this thing, right? Whatever it could be. It could even be a sex act. I don't know. But it's kind of like, the whole idea of like a cop wearing a badge, because that badge is proof that he is empowered by the local government or the state government or even the federal government to perform law enforcement, right? So that badge, that's what that badge is. And that badge, that object, is like the source of power that ISTJs and ENFPs draw upon when they're playing out their fantasies of being that EMT or being that firefighter or being that policeman or being that soldier, etc. Playing out these roles because they have that badge or they have that stripe, right? Because that's something they earned, right? And they love taking that home into the bedroom. This is why ESTP and INFJ women are hella attracted to men in uniform. It means so much to them. They love men in uniform. They absolutely love it. And even some of the SJ women out there are also attracted to men in uniform as well, because it fulfills their traditionalism. And also, like, if there is an ESTP or an INFJ who was taking on that uniform as well, they're going deeper into their shadow, and their shadow is taking advantage of that approach, right? The ICJ shadow of the ESTP, or the ENFP shadow of the INFJ, and also, temporarily being a source of role play for the sexuality between these couples, basically. But yeah, it's that justification, and be like, hey, my badge justifies me to act this way in the bedroom, right? Or me being dressed like this justifies me to act this way in the bedroom. And the ESTPs, the INFJs, men or women, completely get off on it. They entirely get off on it, especially the women. So, and it's a fascinating sexual tactic to use, and if you're in a relationship with an ESTP or an INFJ woman, you should definitely ham that up whenever you get the opportunity. Absolutely ham that up, because that's just something that they are looking for. I remember so many times even Railgun telling me how attracted she was to me when I was literally dressed in BDUs, walking around like a soldier, and she thought that was like the greatest thing in the world. And I was like, okay. And I guess that makes a lot of sense as to why she used to be a Marine. So, fair enough. But yeah, like, just a bunch of stuff like that. Like, oftentimes, we just don't really know. We just don't really know, like, all these little nuances within, bedroom dynamics. And when we have an opportunity to know what they are, just hammer them, folks. Seriously, just hammer them. Go for it. Why not? The ISTJs and ENFPs really bringing fantasy to the table. The ESTP and INFJ ends up having insane enjoyment. Why? Well, because, again, their love language is quality time. And having a quality activity, also known as quality time, activities and time, it's the same thing. But, the fantasy is an example of a well thought out activity, an amazingly thought out shared experience, right? Because Soul Temple likes to act like different things, because they like to act like things they idolize, and they like to act like things they objectify. That's why, for example, ESTPs and INFJs often end up being, women end up being brats or rope bunnies, from a BDSM sexuality point of view, right? And most would not even realize that that's the case, because they want to act like a literal animal in bed, or sometimes, it's funny, I actually saw this in a comment Facebook where someone's like, yeah, sometimes I just want to be nothing more than just a pure pair of tits to my man in the bedroom, for example, right? And it's just ridiculous to me, like, how people just repress their sexuality so much that they don't even discuss these specific things on a regular basis, when it's all really just laid out for us psychologically. If we actually just take the time to discuss these things, you'll start to see that, if everyone's discussing it simultaneously, there are patterns. But, we have to keep all this hidden, because, God forbid, we have children who would potentially grow up and challenge the system and lead to revolution. God forbid. We can't allow that to happen ever. So we have to keep everyone enslaved. So we have to prevent people from having babies. So we need to shit on sexuality as much as we can to prevent people from having babies, since the Catholic Church was used as a vehicle since the Dark Ages to control population. And then when that failed, we have to utilize things like the United Nations instead. Right? So, anyway. But yeah, like that's really the gist of it, the activities, the love language of the ESTP and the INFJ, the ultimate activity to them is fantasy. And the ultimate fantasy to the ISTJ and the ENFP is having that shared experience with somebody else to help act out their fantasy, because they don't want to act out their fantasy alone. That's the key. They don't want to act it out alone, because to them it's meaningless if they are acting it out alone. So anyway, folks, thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.